From San Antonio, Texas, home of the Alamo, the Riverwalk, and the World Heritage San Antonio Missions, this is the Exit Planning Coach podcast with John F. Dini. Designed to help advisors who work with business owners, John talks with top professionals in the exit planning field about best practices, marketing tips, and how to be more effective when working with owners. Now, here's John F. Dini.
Welcome to today's broadcast of the Exit Planning Coach. And I would like to welcome Pat Ennis today. Pat is a longtime subscriber to the ExitMap and has become a friend for the time we've spent together up in Denver at the national meetings where I first met him. Pat has worked in for-profit and non-for-profit companies and been in leadership positions with both. He's founded ENNIS Legacy Partners in 2010, and they specialize in goals-based comprehensive approaches for business owners who are intent on building transferable business value. Pat is a certified exit planner, a chartered advisor of philanthropy, and a certified financial planner, and he has years of ministry experience. And he serves on various nonprofit boards, and they have included Advisors in Philanthropy for Washington, D.C., Peacemaker Ministries, Montgomery County Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and the Razoo Foundation. He is also an elder at Covenant Life Church in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Welcome, Pat. Glad to have you today.
John, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, this will be neat. I knew a lot about you, but in our conversations, I never knew about your ministry leadership. I've got to ask, what is the Razoo Foundation?
Yeah, Razoo Foundation, I was involved a number of years ago. And basically, it was a platform to democratize charitable giving. And so they just provided an online platform, making it very easy for you to give to whoever you wanted to give to.
Neat.
Yeah.
Neat. What were you doing before you formed ELP?
Yeah. So, I've got a few years under my belt, John. As you know, I'm 63.
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
So most of my career has been in wealth management with firms like Fidelity Investments and Merrill Lynch. And from 2003 to 2011, I was an executive director of a nonprofit. Prior to that was all wealth management, and then after that nonprofit stint, I went back, and a friend of mine approached me about becoming a partner in his wealth management boutique RIA. And I did that for 4 years. But during the nonprofit days, I got really interested in business owners because some of our biggest donors were business owners. And I just saw the impact that they had. And they used to come to me for counsel on leadership and management. And my wife noticed that I really enjoyed that. So she just continued to encourage me to hang out a shingle as a consultant. And so in 2010, I did that. I hung out a shingle and started to do some consulting for small business owners. And in 2014, I actually liquidated my partnership interest in the wealth management firm and went full into it. And started out just doing block and tackle strategic planning, but real quick, within a year, it transitioned to what we're going to be talking about today, exit planning.
Great. So 2014, you said you started doing exit planning?
Well, it was really 2014 is when I went full time into consulting. And it was really around 2015 that I even learned, you'd already been doing exit planning for decades. It was around 2015 that I first heard the terminology exit planning. And here's how it happened. We were doing some strategic planning, growth planning, if you will, for a client. And the owner's wife kept would ask, okay, look, I appreciate you guys always talking about building the business, but I don't want to own this business at any point. And so do you have a plan for that? And so they kind of both looked at me, and because I was a certified financial planner, I thought, okay, you know what, I can probably put some pieces together. And so I started to, and we had an advisory board, one of which you know, Walter Dial, you know, Walter.
Sure.
He was on our advisory board, and he had just gotten certified as an exit planner. And so I was describing to him what we were doing for this particular client. And he said, well, you know what that is? And I said, no, it's exit planning. I said, well, what's that? He said, well, it's kind of what you're doing. And then he said, you could probably get certified in it fairly quickly because you're certified in all these other things. And so I did, and we learned more about it, and we just really had vision to do the work because of all the background, my wealth management background, and then business leadership background and interest in business owners. It just made sense to kind of go in this direction. And around that time, you can affirm this, not a whole lot of people or firms were talking about exit planning. You were probably one of the only ones. And but now everybody and their brothers seems to be advertising for exit planning.
Yeah, I tell people 10 years ago, well, actually it's about 13 or 14 years ago when I started exit planning. I didn't, nobody knew the term. You would say exit planning to them and they'd look at you blankly. And about 5 years ago, they stopped looking at me blankly and saying, oh, exit planning. Yeah, I know what that is. Mm-hmm. And, now they say exit planning. Yeah, I really need to do that, but they still aren't doing it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's
one more step to go here. Get people to actually do it.
For us, John.
Yeah, it does. It does. Describe to me your typical first meeting with a client.
Yeah, well, the first meeting is really like it is with most consultants, right? We're just trying to figure out if it's a good fit, getting to know them, getting to know us, and just exploring what it is that they have in mind or don't have in mind, and how we might help, and just answering any questions about our firm that they would have. So it's really, we call it exploratory, which many consultants do either.
Sure.
And that's what we call it. And we'll tell, if we met with you today and we had that kind of conversation, we would tell you whether or not we're the right fit for you or not.
I was just kidding, and obviously you were laughing. You feel the same way about, the huge number of business owners that feel they should, but they haven't. What magic words do you say that wakes a prospect up that's talking to you and say, you're right, I need to start?
Yeah, I guess we try to help them understand all that's at stake, because there's a ton at stake. I mean, like, okay, we had a meeting with new client this morning, real nice business, around 10 million in revenue. They've done a really good job, and financial performance is strong, and they want to exit in the next number of years, but they don't know what they want to do. They don't know if they want to be third party, and that's a typical client for us. They don't know which direction they want to go in. In that exploratory conversation, if they're kind of on the fence, or they say something that indicates they're going to wait, we'll say, okay, well, waiting certainly is an option for you, but can we just discuss what's at stake if you indeed wait longer, and we talk about what's at stake as best we can at that point, knowing what we know about their business in a general sense. It's hard to quantify it, but we can put some general numbers on it. But just helping them because a lot of times they don't really have a clear picture, John, as you know, as to what is at stake. There's a ton. They've had a massive impact. If they've been in business 5 years, but many of the owners we're working with, they've been in business a lot longer than that. Their all the people that have come to depend on them, their family, of course, if they have a family, but their employees, their customers, a lot of times the community, the local economy, the vendors, suppliers, all that's at stake. Of course, their personal financial futures at stake as to how successful they are financially in exiting. But then values-based goals are at stake. Maybe relationships could be at stake. So we'll just ask questions along those lines in the exploratory conversation. And then if indeed the conversation starts to head in a direction where it looks like they're going to procrastinate, we'll basically just remind them of the answers to the questions they've already given us, and try to help them to understand, okay, all of this is at stake. And the sooner you get planning, the better. And then of course we can give examples of, we're always ready with examples of where, planning hasn't taken place and where owners haven't exited on their own terms and conditions or successfully.
Sure. I've run, as you know, I've run peer groups for many years, and we've brought speakers in for group events from time to time. And I tell them, when they tell stories, business owners like stories of people's successes, but they also like stories of people's disasters.
They do,
yeah. There, but for the grace go I, that kind of thing. They really like to hear about people that didn't do well, and what the downside is, because they live with it every day. The what if I do this, if I don't do this. So it's not like they're frightened to hear those stories. They just get it. Hey, let me stop for a second here so we can pay the bills.
Yeah,
and we'll
pay
be
the
right.
bills, John.
Yeah, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor, as they say.
How would your practice survive if only 25% of your clients were happy with your work? How many referrals would you get? Would you advertise that success rate? Over the last decade, both the Exit Planning Institute and PwC have surveyed owners and found that 75% were profoundly unhappy a year after their exits. In 10 years, the exit planning industry has done little to fix this issue. Business owners need purpose, direction, and activity after exiting. Planning for that starts with your very first coaching conversation. We work with advisors who believe that clients should be happy after exiting. ExitMap is a structured discovery process that helps you have deeper conversations about client options, objectives, and life after the business. We help you launch better transitions. Take a test drive at exitmap.com.
Welcome back to the Exit Planning Coach podcast. I'm here with Pat Ennis of ENNIS Legacy Partners. And Pat, I tell you, before we go forward, if other people, after hearing this, this is an advisor to advisor piece, and if they want to get a hold of you because they need assistance in some aspect of exit planning or working with their clients, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. They can call 301-859-0860, or they could reach out through our website, ENNISLP.com. Ennis is spelled ENNISLP.com.
Great. And what would you say, where do you feel strongest in the planning process? There are so many aspects to it. What do you think you're best at?
Yeah, great question. Because it's so broad and comprehensive, and we have a comprehensive approach. So that's a smart question. The soft skills, we're particularly good at that because both of us, I have a business partner, Corby McGordon. Both of us have a lot of experience professionally, where soft skills were much needed and needed to be developed, and so we're good there. But then also we're particularly good with financial modeling. Corby he can model anything, and spreadsheets are a religion. At heart, he's a financial analyst, and he's just really good at it. So those two things we're exceptionally good at.
Okay, great. How do you market for new business?
Being old guys like we are, Corby and I, we have a lifestyle business. All of our clients, they want to get value out of their business eventually. Our business is lifestyle at this point. And so being old guys that we are and around us, we have a pretty significant network. And so we get a pretty steady flow of referrals. But beyond that, I would say we have a blog, we have a podcast, and you've been on it a number of
Sure,
times.
I have. It's fun.
We do those and then we get them out. You know, we have Facebook pages, we have LinkedIn pages, we have Twitter pages, you know, all that stuff. And so we consistently get those podcasts and those blogs out. And that's about it, John, other than, you know, our network.
Yeah, I do. Having been on your podcast, our ambition is to be as good with the distribution as you are, because you're really great at setting up the links and getting the inbound feeds. Before, during, or after a planning engagement, or maybe it's all three, how would you describe your ideal client relationship?
Yeah, ideal clients. Okay, well, to this point, they've been the largest client we've worked with, 35 million in revenue, but most of them fall under 15 million. And then most of them are probably between 3 and 12. They know they need a plan, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. You know, they don't know if they want to sell to a third party, sell insider, sell, transfer to kids, ESOP. They don't know. They need help. They have adequate time for planning, so they don't have to leave in 6 months, because if they do, there's little we can do for them, as you know.
Sure.
So they have adequate time for planning. They're motivated and willing to make change. And then they also have the needed people and the cash flow to support or facilitate the change. So those are really the primary or key. And we've learned these things hard way over the last 8 years. I mean, that, you know, you might have someone who's motivated, but they don't have the resources to facilitate change.
Sure.
And so we've learned, and so those are the common characteristics.
Sure. That's why, as you well know, in ExitMap, there are other softwares around for planning, and you know, they want to take people through a sales module and a finance module and a, you know, capital expenditure model and a marketing module and a documentation of operations module. And an ExitMap, in our structured discovery, all we ask about is the management team, because if you've got that, you can do all the rest. If you don't, it doesn't matter how many modules you look at.
Well, that's exactly right too. And if you don't have cash flow, discretionary cash flow, it doesn't matter what you find out with the modules either, because you're going to be very limited in how much change you can actually facilitate.
Right.
Yeah,
although
we use, well, as you mentioned earlier on, and here I'll give you another plug for, we use your tools, a couple of your tools. One in particular we use with, it doesn't matter what size client we have. Like this morning, the client we had this morning, around 10 million in revenue. We use the owner centricity and the management succession tool with, doesn't matter how big. We use the express process with businesses that are smaller, 3 million and under usually, the entire process, sometimes 5 million. Yeah, no, completely agree. And we've learned that kind of just through experience. What you just said, it was a very key point. We've learned that through experience.
Yeah. What's an issue that keeps coming up in client after client? What is your big challenge when you finally get them to agree to do exit planning?
When they agree to do it, we're pretty selective at this point. I mean, if they really don't demonstrate motivation and willingness to work at this in the exploratory conversation, we'll just find a gracious way to suggest they do something else or get other help. So when we bring them on, we know they're motivated. So we don't run into those kind of challenges really so much. However, you do still need to read the client and how they communicate, how they like to communicate, how much they can handle in any given meeting. You know, some owners can go a good 2 hours, 2.5 hours in any given meeting and do a lot of pre-sale kind of due diligence, readiness assessment kind of stuff. And then another one, you just know fairly quickly, an hour is the most we can do.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, just reading and understanding your client, how they like to communicate. It can be a challenge, but it's really not so much for us anymore because we just understand that and try to work with it. But when it comes to the actual plan and implementing, other than financial performance and where that's at, the issue that you mentioned a second ago, the management team and the shape it's in, if it even exists.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, and they're not capable of making change or willing even, then you're going to be limited in how much change you're going to make. And so many of these small businesses that we work with or come in contact with really don't have that, or they got the wrong team on the bus.
Yeah, well,
That's probably the biggest challenge.
I mention it regularly, but one of the anomalies I look for in the assessment is when an owner responds that I have a management team that makes all the day-to-day decisions and I work 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you know, I'll get right up in their shirt collar on that one on the first interview. It's like either one of these is not true, or you have an unsaleable business. Which one would you opt for? Let me wrap up, ask you one question. Obviously, as we discussed in the beginning, exit planning is riding the wave. I mean, we all know the numbers. We all know that there are 3 million boomer owners, 57 or older, who will have to get out of their businesses in the next 10 to 15 years. For somebody that's just coming into exit planning, somebody is starting out and is listening to this for tips, what would you tell them about getting started? What would your advice be for them to do?
Certainly go through a certification process with either EPI or BEI. You of course are certified with both. I'm certified with BEI, and Corby, my business partner, is certified with EPI. So we've got both covered there, but doing that, and then just connecting to industry leaders, and which of course I consider you one of those. You're one of our go-to people. As you know, we've contacted you for advice apart from your tools, and just gotten some advice. So being connected to the right people who have been doing this for a long time, and just have experience that you don't have yet. That's been huge help to us, having a network like that.
And I think that network also comes from when you do the certification, from from attending those events and meeting other folks. I know I've got my very first boot camp with BEI back in 2010. I met somebody that I still call on for his advice today, because he's just still to this day, the sharpest guy I met in his field.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And early on, when we get a new client, one of the things we tell them is one of the things we do is identify and then test your assumptions, and then find out what you know and what you don't know. Because we know this, There are things you don't know.
Yeah.
And so just know this, when you come into exit planning, boy, there's a lot you probably don't know, because I'm just grateful. One of the things I'm grateful for, John, is that we didn't have too many clients early on, because we've learned a lot about what we didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it was the grace of God that we had a limited number that we could really focus on and work on hard. And in that, we learned a lot that we didn't know. And we were able to serve those people and serve them well. But if we'd have had a whole bunch of business right at the gate, it probably wouldn't have turned out real good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the same thing. I think I just finished the first draft of my new book, and I mentioned.
Congratulations!
Oh,
I
thank
didn't know
you.
about your new book. What's the new book?
The Exit Planning Coach Handbook.
Oh, sweet.
And it's another advisor to advisor piece. But I mentioned an early engagement I had where I finished the write up and the recommendations. You know how it works, and he took it to his CPA, and he had a 3-year exit time frame. And he took it to his CPA, and his CPA said, "I don't know why you have to pay a consultant to do this stuff for you. I could do this just as easily." And as I mentioned in the book, last time I talked to him, it was 7 years later, and he wasn't out yet. I regret that I didn't know enough to make the arguments for him to continue down the path. I feel badly about it, even though his CPA is the one that screwed him up. I feel badly about it.
I understand what you mean, because a lot of advisors, they too don't know what they don't know, unless you're doing this work all the time and you're constantly learning and you're doing comprehensive work. There's probably stuff you don't know even if you're you're an advisor.
Oh, I had finish up quickly with a short one. Doing a transition to a third party, the attorney got on the phone and said, "Well, why don't you do a 338H10?" And proudly, I knew what that was. And I said, "Why would we do that?" And he explained some issues with contract transfer. And I said, "That's a really good idea." And then the buyers came back and they said, "Well, we've decided to do a 336E." And I'm like, "Oh, gee, what's that?" Quick, get out the book, flip the pages, And then I was talking to a CPA tax expert I knew, and I told him I got halfway through the story, and before I could say 336E, he said, "Oh, don't tell me, let me guess. They decided to do the 338 G10 instead." I'm like, "Oh man, I got to get the book out again." It's like, so you're right. It's always something. As long as the IRS stays in business, we'll have something to do.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's been a pleasure, sir. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, John.
We're going to be doing things in the future around specific topics and things we run into in exit planning, and I think we're going to do a couple of panels. So I hope you'd be willing to come back again.
Of course, absolutely. And yeah, for any of your listeners that are thinking about or getting started, or anyone who wants to talk to someone who's been doing it for a while now and has probably made all the mistakes, they should feel free to reach out.
Yeah, never say that. That's like jinxing yourself. You'll find out this afternoon that there's one you hadn't made yet.
Okay, thanks, John.
Well, Pat, thanks a lot. You can find Pat's information at NSLP, and of course, it'll accompany this podcast. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and have a great day, Pat.